Hello, I'm John. Welcome back. I've got a tag video for you today. It's the Snob-O-Meter Tag, which was created by that reading guy, and he was kind enough to tag me. And there are, 11 prompts, plus the, prompt to tag other people. So I liked this one. I liked his questions. I liked the answers he had, and I'm looking forward to this one. So let's see. Number one. What is your definition of book snobbery? My definition of book snobbery, I'm going to try not to complicate this. I kind of see definitions as being, it's kind of hard for me to loosely define something. I, I prefer very, neat and precise definitions of things. So to be able to just pull one out of my mind is going to be a little bit difficult. But I would say that book snobbery is having an idea of which books are valuable, which are filled with meaning and therefore better than other books. And snobbery would be looking down on anyone who deviates from reading those, valuable, educational, deep books. So if you're, thinking of somebody who's reading, trash, which not bad trash, good trash, enjoyable trash, entertaining fiction, and you think that their reading is meaningless and that they're wasting their time, that is book snobbery. And there seems to be this idea of that you can't love both. Like, you can't read Homer and then read, like, good Lord, was it Don Pendleton that wrote the Executioner series? Or you can't read like cheesy celebrity memoirs and then also read Boccaccio or whatever. That's kind of my definition of book snobbery, is anybody who has kind of a gatekeeping idea of what literature is valuable and, you know, has nothing but ill to say about everything else, which is kind of a way of, well, it's cliquish behavior, isn't it? It's my group's better than your group and all that high school crap. Number two, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Such as, would you ever read a romance? Would you ever try a science fiction novel? I've read a lot of science fiction novels, and I have been considering reading a romance novel. I really like Georgette Hare, and she wrote mystery novels and romance novels. And I've never read a romance novel. I don't know why. I mean, they just don't really call to me, uh, you know. And I don't think there's a type of genre I wouldn't read. I think I've read pretty much, I've read pretty widely. There are some that call to me more than others, like, I really don't have an interest in celebrity memoirs, for instance. I don't have much interest in romances as a whole. Um, but no, I don't think so. I mean, I think if I picked up a book and I, read the blurb and thought it was interesting, then I might read it. I kind of let my interests take me where they will, and usually that works out pretty well for me. Number three, does erotica count as literature? Well, first you have to define what literature is, right? And that is like a minefield, and there are all these different definitions of what literature is. But does erotica count as literature? I think it could. There, I'll just say it. I think it could. I haven't read much of it, and I really haven't read much of it in the past, I don't know, 15 years. I mean, there was a little phase there when I was about 17 or 18 when I read a little bit, but I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I hate to judge a whole genre without knowing it. So I really can't answer that question. And maybe that right there might be kind of snobbery. A lot of snobs look down on books and genres they have never read. They have no experience of it. They just put other people down because, oh, that's terrible. That's meaningless, drivel. That's kind of a definition of snobbery also, is looking down on things that you yourself have no experience with because you believe yourself to be superior to that person or thing. Let's see. Number 4. Is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? I think we've all known people who are insufferable readers of classical books and insufferable readers of popular bestsellers. Now, there's a reason that books become classics, right? There is a reason that Homer and Plato and Aristotle, there's a reason that those books have been passed down to the current age. And it's because they resonate within people. They speak to something that is inherent within all of us. And popular bestsellers, I mean, once again, I'm brought back to, why can't you read both? That's my basic idea of it. I think that there is no reason why a person can't read, trashy fiction in the morning and then read the classics in the evening, or jump right from 50s science fiction into whatever, Middlemarch. To me, there's not really hard set boundaries like that. Kind of seem ridiculous to me. I think that I personally think you should read whatever you want to read. That being said, I mean, now this is a complicated one actually, because a lot of times classics have survived because of their prose. So they are perhaps written better than popular bestsellers. But I would say that a lot of times classics don't always speak to people in our contemporary world. The issues seem quite a lot different sometimes. I mean, the basics are there, but the thing about a contemporary bestseller is a lot of times that it speaks to us right now in the moment. And I think that's valuable. And I think that can be as valuable as the message from a classic. So that's probably not a very concise answer to that question, but I think that, I think it's best to read everything. Number 5. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? Yes. When I was younger, and I can't even really remember an instance of it. I think I read like some Dostoevsky at one point when I was in my early 20s, and I was being kind of snobby about it. I used to run around with friends, and we all had kind of snobby ideas. It was to be in our group was to there were certain things you could read, certain things you could do, or movies you could watch that would make you cooler, right? And that is a very young people kind of thing, and most people grow out of it, and I'm glad to say that I have. So yes, there was a time when I was pretty, insufferable in that way, and I'm pretty sure that I have grown out of it mostly, and there may still be some kind of free-floating snobbery in there somewhere, but I try, when I feel it coming out, I try to smash it back down. Okay, number 6. Do audiobooks count as reading? What about comic books or graphic novels? So there's a simple answer to that, which is that audiobooks are not reading, because you are listening to an audiobook. It's not the physical act of reading. But you are consuming the material, and you can discuss the material that you have heard. So I think in the greater definition of the word reading, sure, it's reading. But if you want to get down to the technical definition of reading, then technically it's not reading. It's not the physical act of reading. But I think that the two are very much the same. Now, I don't think they affect the same parts of your brain or anything like that. I think that, now this is like a minefield on BookTube, and people get angry about this kind of thing, and I don't really understand why. I don't look down on audiobooks. I think they're really nice. My dad, for instance, he drives a truck all over the place, and he listens to audiobooks, or he used to, but he doesn't as much as he used to. And, he got some really good things out of that. It was really good for him. So I don't look down on audiobooks at all. I have never personally been able to get into audiobooks because my mind wanders, and I can't sit still that long. Like, I don't know why, but I can sit still and read, physically read, but I can't listen to an audiobook without doing something else. And then my mind wanders and I just lose track of it. Now, what about comic books or graphic novels? Well, that is the physical act of reading. So, yes, I think it does count. I don't look down on that because that's how a lot of people get their start into reading. It's very good for younger people. And, I mean, I have trouble with comics and I have trouble with graphic novels because I'm not a particularly visual person and I read pretty fast. So a lot of it is lost on me. But I do think it counts as reading. Okay, number 7. Have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book, a book with little substance to it? For example, a self-help book or a celebrity memoir. I do question sometimes why people read certain books. And I sometimes feel like, self-help books in particular, I've read a lot of them, and a lot of the information in self-help books feels very obvious and very, it's hard to explain this, but it feels like the person writing the book is telling you what you want to hear a lot of times. And they're doing that in order to make a lot of money. And a lot of the wisdom in self-help books feels like it has been stolen from more, deeper books, reading other books, that kind of thing. But I don't look down on people for reading self-help books. I mean, if they're reading them, something is in their life that they feel needs fixed, that they need help with. And let's see, celebrity memoirs, a lot of those are just soulless cash grabs. And a lot of them contain fabrications, shall we say. But the question is, have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? And the answer is yes. And once again, we have to go further back in my life to a time before I realized that there is value in reading regardless of what you are reading. So yeah, when I was younger, I was pretty insufferable. I mean, I never made it to, like, I don't know how it is now, but when I was a kid, when I was in my teens, it was like neckbeard and the fedora kids and the cut-off gloves. I never I never got into that. And those kids were, you know, insufferably shallow. And I never quite made it to that level, but I was kind of a snob. And yeah, so here we are dragging out my youth. Number 8, have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? But with books, I don't think so. I've encountered it on BookTube in comments and that sort of thing, but no, I don't think anybody has ever, been a snob towards me. Not on BookTube and not in my everyday life. I don't know if that's just because I read widely. I don't know if it's because most of my reading has been done in private. I'm sure there's probably something that happened to me at some point that I'm just forgetting, but I can't think of anything right now. Number 9, would you ever be friends with a snob? Maybe you already are. Well, there are different kinds of snobs. There are like lovable snobs, like Niles Crane type snobs, and then there are malicious snobs, and they're not really in the same category. So a lovable snob will be a snob but still be kind to you and polite to you and maybe tease you, but they won't be toxic about their snobbery, right? They will never think of you as a lesser human being because you read something they don't like. And I would, the lovable snob might be a little bit irritating from time to time, but the malicious snob, no, I don't want anything to do with malicious snobs. Number 10, are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? I mean, my immediate thought towards that is yes. But that might just be because I like to read, and I like people who like to read, and I like to talk about books, and I like to think about books, and I feel like books open up a whole world to someone that is not available to someone who doesn't read. But I've known people who don't read who seem pretty sophisticated also, perhaps sophisticated in a different way. That's a difficult question to answer. And I don't really know how to properly answer it. Because like I said, my immediate instinct is yes. But I've known exceptions to the rule. But I do think that people who read, and people who read widely, tend to be more knowledgeable about the world, more culturally knowledgeable. So I'm going to say yes, even though maybe that makes me a little bit of a snob still. 11. Measure yourself. Based on your answers to the previous 10 questions, would you qualify as a book snob? A little bit. Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Like I said, I really try hard not to look down on people for what they're reading. And I think that the best thing for people to do is to read. And I think that when people read, you can reason with them, right? You can encourage them to read other books, to read the objectively great books, you can see the change in people as they read, I think. But I try really hard not to look down on people for what they're reading. I'm just glad that people are reading. Um, Now, when my snob meter comes out, my snobby self, it usually tends to be when I'm in a bookstore and I overhear a conversation. This has happened to me many times where I'll be standing in a bookstore and nobody pays any attention to me because I stand there and I don't look around, I don't talk to anybody. I just stand there and I look at books and I move from place to place. So I hear all kinds of conversations. And I have heard some conversations that were just like nails on a chalkboard, right? And that's where I still deal with being snobby. And I try to work on that. But sometimes some of the things you hear just really, they're just hard to stomach. And you're thinking, why? Why do you think like that? Why would you? I don't know. I don't really want to get into that. But um, so, yeah, I guess I'm kind of a snob. Maybe I should work on that. But I try really hard not to be. I really do, I realize that there are some books and some genres that aren't for me. I'm not a big fan of fantasy. I've never read romance. But I just try to be happy for people for reading. And most of my snobbiness comes out not in relation to what other people are reading, but when they're, having these conversations, a lot of times my snobbiness is a reaction to their snobbiness. Like they are saying, you shouldn't read that, that's terrible, or you shouldn't do this, or that you shouldn't thing, that snobbiness, that you shouldn't read this, you shouldn't read that. All that really says to me is this person is saying, don't form your own opinions, listen to mine. And that bothers me. So maybe I'm not actually a snob. Maybe I'm just annoyed by other people's snobbiness. I don't know. I've probably gone way off track here and probably didn't do a very good job of answering this particular question, but I am probably a little bit of a snob. But anyway, that brings us to the last prompt and tag some people. I have quite a few people I'm thinking of tagging for this one. I didn't write anybody down because there are quite a few people I know I'm going to tag. And so I want to thank that reading guy for creating this and for being kind enough to tag me. And I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.